On November 30th, 2018, the Smith family in Baltimore, Maryland, were having a night out. Valeria Smith was with her father, Keith, and her stepmother, Jacqueline, belatedly celebrating her 28th birthday. At the American Legion Hall, they ate, drank, danced, and took photos. When the family exited the Legion just before midnight, no one would have predicted that the night was about to turn deadly. A few blocks from Valeria's home, Keith slowed the car to a stop and rolled down the passenger window. Jacqueline wished to offer money to a new mother who was out on the street, carrying a small bundle in her arms as well as a sign that read, "Please help me feed my baby." As Keith would later tragically recount, stopping to help the woman in need would prove to be Jacqueline Smith's fatal mistake. Both he and his daughter had a message for the city of Baltimore. Be careful who you trust, because things are not always as they seem. 52-year-old Keith Smith placed a frantic 911 call from his vehicle at 12:30 a.m. on December 1, 2018. His wife, Jacqueline, had been the victim of a stabbing. She was in the passenger seat next to him and needed immediate assistance. His daughter, Valeria, was in the back seat of the car. She was also a witness to the unexpected, horrific attack on her stepmother. The operator directed Keith to Johns Hopkins Hospital. Despite valiant medical efforts, Jacqueline Smith succumbed to her injuries. She had sustained 5 stab wounds to her torso and a single cut to her lower right arm. She was pronounced dead before 1 a.m. that night. She was the victim of an unsolicited attack by 2 panhandlers who had taken what they could from her and then run off.
Just felt moved to give her something. So at the stop sign, she waved her over to come on over to the car, and then out of nowhere, some guy came over while walking with her. And I hit my window, and Jacqueline went to hand the money out, and the guy just leaned over, said, "Can I thank your wife?" And I said, "You can thank my wife." And within that split second, this guy commenced to stabbing my wife. Blood was everywhere. It was something that, it was horrific for something like that to happen. But I'm right now just absorbing all of it.
Jacqueline Ann Smith was born Jacqueline Trevane in Providence, Rhode Island, on July 4, 1964. According to her mother, she was a joyful child who grew into a loving and ceaselessly caring adult. At an early age, Jacqueline developed a love of music and poetry.
That's what we did. We enjoyed music, we listened to music. And so when I'm in my car and I'm listening to music now, I shed a tear.
At the age of 54, Jacqueline had raised 2 adult sons, one in college and the second a graduate who had joined the U.S. Coast Guard. Professionally, she had been very successful, holding a role as an electrical engineer and working for the Department of Defense in Maryland. In 2014, she married Keith Smith. The couple was active in their church. Jacqueline was known as a woman of faith. She was also known to have a very generous nature.
Jackie was an awesome, awesome woman, and it's really, really sad, and it's heartbreaking the way that she was taken from us.
The day following Jacqueline's murder, her husband and stepdaughter courageously stepped out in front of the media to offer a warning to their neighbors. Do not blindly trust in the authenticity of those who appear desperate and in need of your help. They could be dangerous. Some of those on the street are not who they appear to be. This sentiment was also offered by law enforcement, who issued a warning to the residents of Baltimore to be cautious.
I just want to let Baltimore know to be careful when you feel like you want to give, because you don't know what the intentions are of the person that you're giving to.
It makes me look at this whole world differently now. You know, it makes me look at everything and everyone. Nothing is ever what it seems. And you just have to protect your family out here.
Using this ruse as panhandlers to get the attention of their would-be victim. And we also want to caution the public about engaging with panhandlers and recognizing the fact that not all of them have honest intent. Not all of them are in real need.
The nature of the attack on Jacqueline left many on edge and began to stoke fears of the homeless, not only in Baltimore but across the country as news of the horrific murder spread into the national media. Attention was drawn further when Oprah heard of Jacqueline's act of kindness that had led to her death. She tweeted, "I've done this 1,000 times, but I will think twice before ever doing it again." Law enforcement released the descriptions of the two suspects, ostensibly panhandlers who are targeting charitable individuals to rob them and, if need be, attack them.
To identify that suspect, he's described as a man possibly in his 30s with a goatee. And we also want to identify the woman who was out there asking for money.
Homicide detectives had met with Keith and Valeria on the night of the murder at John Hopkins and had taken their initial statements. Then they drove straight out to the 1000 block of Valley Street to secure the crime scene. 3 detectives arrived within a few hours of the incident. Yet they were unable to find any indications of the stabbing at the location where it had taken place. The next morning, at just past 10 a.m., Detective Beauregard, Singer, and Santos tried again, this time in the light of day. They began to conduct a survey of the neighborhood. After walking the streets, searching the surrounding area, and speaking with local residents, they found nothing of evidentiary value. The team was unable to independently verify where the Smiths' Audi had stopped for the panhandlers. They could not locate any witnesses. The murder weapon, a knife, was not found. What did become apparent to the team of experienced detectives was that the 1000 block of Valley Street was neither a well-traveled nor a very well-populated area. This was not an area where panhandlers would typically be found. The survey of the neighborhood concluded that most of the houses on the 1000 block were vacant.
Nobody's really panhandling right there. You know what I'm saying? Nobody.
Keith and Jacqueline's 2012 Audi A7, driven by Keith that night, was brought to police headquarters directly from the hospital for processing. Latent prints were recovered from the exterior of the vehicle on the passenger's side. But these were determined to be those of Keith Smith. No other prints were identified. A pair of black gloves were resting on the top of the center console, and a second set of yellow rubber gloves were retrieved from the back seat. An acrylic fingernail had broken off in the seat as well. It appeared to match those worn by Valeria Smith. There was no unidentified DNA or fingerprints in the vehicle that could assist law enforcement in tracking down the unknown panhandler murderers. The investigators were still seeking to corroborate the details provided by Keith and his daughter. Specifically, they sought to verify the route taken by the vehicle. The FBI was called in to assist with extracting data from the audience's computer to obtain the GPS location data. They were unsuccessful. Despite their thorough and focused efforts, the Baltimore police were struggling to locate any leads. The Homeless Outreach Team, or HOT team, was also notified. Based on the descriptions provided by Keith and Valeria, this team used all its existing resources but was unable to develop any suspects.
I just want them to find, if anybody knows anybody, if anybody has any information, please help us and find out who did this to my stepmother, please.
The inability to verify the crime scene was an obvious hindrance to the investigation. Seeking to piece together a timeline of the evening, investigators began by acquiring surveillance footage across the city to track the Smiths' movements. They arrived at the American Legion Hall on Madison Avenue. Cameras there confirmed that the Smiths left the hall together at 11:45 p.m. Reviewing the footage of 27 CCTV cameras from the Legion to Valley Street near Valeria's home, the team sought to recreate the path taken by Keith and verified by his daughter. Detectives were unable to locate the Audi on any of the cameras around the areas described. They reviewed motion-activated residential security cameras that could have captured angles of the incident itself. First, at East Chase Street, they found nothing. Then they reviewed the cameras facing East Edgar Street, and again, the cameras failed to capture any footage of the incident or of Keith Smith's vehicle. Their next step was to acquire the cell phone data from Keith and Valeria's phones. Hopefully, they could use signal data to map the family's movements that night. Keith's cell phone showed no activity throughout the evening before he placed the call to 911 after his wife was stabbed. But data from Valeria's cell phone proved to be insightful. It showed that the family had not gone south after leaving the American Legion to take Valeria home, as they had told detectives. Instead, they turned north. Connected towers indicated that the family had traveled to Druid Hill Park, near the Maryland Zoo, and had remained in that location for approximately 15 minutes. Neither of the Smiths had mentioned this stop to the police. In addition to analyzing the father and daughter's phones, police obtained the activity from Jacqueline's stolen device. Curiously, the last activity shown on her phone was from about 4 p.m. that afternoon, from her home in Aberdeen. Although it was reported that Jacqueline had her cell phone with her on the night of her murder, there is no indication that it ever left her house. What about the other missing items? In the days following the murder, pawn shops across the city were checked for any of the belongings stolen from Jacqueline during the attack. Her necklace, purse, and cell phone had not turned up in any shops. They could not be located. A week and a half later, however, Jacqueline's Visa card was flagged. Someone had been using it. Detectives tracked down 3 male teenagers who claimed to have found the card in a Michael Kors clutch left at a bus stop on the corner of Caroline Street and Madison Avenue. The teens were detained and questioned as potential suspects. They were ultimately released, however, when the location of the bus stop was confirmed to be on the exact route taken by Keith and Valeria after leaving the Legion. At least, the route defined by cell phone data and tracking Google accounts was not the route they had claimed to have traveled. After 3 months of investigating, the Baltimore detectives had failed to uncover a single piece of evidence linking Jacqueline's murder to a pair of panhandlers. What they had discovered was a series of inconsistencies and contradictions in the statements offered by the Smiths. For instance, Keith told police at the hospital that the second panhandler, the man, had reached into the car and stolen his wife's purse. In subsequent statements, he said it was the woman who did so.
Some guy came over to say, "Can I thank her?" And as he did that, and I'm not thinking he's going to do what he did, he commenced to stabbing my wife. Snatched her necklace before I knew it, and the girl snatched a little pocketbook in the seat.
Keith had initially been very vocal to the media and keen to offer a neighborly warning to fear the city's homeless population. But within a week, the story had picked up national news coverage, and Keith abruptly stopped taking interviews. The police confronted Keith with the location data. At that stage, his story changed once again. He claimed that he had been lost that night and was embarrassed to admit it. Yes, they had gone to the park where the family parked for a while and looked through photos they had taken earlier in the evening on their phones. After he was released from that interview, Keith Smith drove home, remotely agreed to a year-long lease for a modest home in Florida, ordered and packed a rental truck, and left the state.
February the 4th, and he came in one night with a very large moving truck and rapidly loaded it the next day, and we never saw him since.
When Valeria was questioned, she requested an attorney, and the interview ended. She later left Maryland as well to meet up with her father. Law enforcement knew that Keith was fleeing, and they were tracking him. Keith must have at least suspected that he was being watched. He attempted to dodge a wiretap on his phone in a few ways. By changing his number, changing his phone provider, and shipping a new cell phone to his daughter. But law enforcement was still listening in. In February 2019, Keith attempted to book 2 flights out of the country, one to Canada and a second to Cuba. These attempts failed, however, because he did not hold a U.S. passport. Keith eventually deduced that he could fly to the U.S. Virgin Islands by providing only a driver's license. While placing these calls, his search engine was locating information on how one might travel to Mexico without formally going through a border crossing. On March 1st, Keith rented a car in Texas. This move prompted an immediate response by police in Baltimore. An arrest warrant was issued for Keith and his daughter 2 days later. The warrant stated that at the time of writing, 11:15 a.m. on March 3rd, both suspects were 20 minutes from the Mexican border in an obvious attempt to flee prosecution for first-degree murder.
Let's be realistic. We would all love to take a vacation to Mexico. You know, you get a chance to go to Mexico, you say yes. Your dad says, hey, you know what, let's head on down to Mexico, let's take a little family vacation, some R&R. I don't see there being any criminal element to that.
Mr. Smith is always innocent until proven guilty, and I haven't seen anything yet that proves him guilty.
Keith and Valeria Smith were arrested by Texas law enforcement later on the same day that the warrant was issued.
In the course of our investigation, we developed evidence that Mr. Smith was leaving Maryland, so we made the appropriate national notifications, and the Texas State Police arrested him this morning.
We pursued the evidence from the very beginning, and these detectives were very tenacious, they were very thorough and dedicated.
These individuals took advantage of a situation, a city that is already dealing with its own problems. So we're looking forward to this cruel act being brought to justice.
The arrest warrant did not outline how investigators believed the father and daughter had committed the murder. It outlined the many lies and deceptions fed to detectives throughout the murder investigation, as well as their failure to turn up any other suspects. But that was not all. It seems that the panhandler ruse was not the first plan proposed by Keith Smith to murder his wife. Investigators learned through a friend of Keith's brother, Vic, that Keith had previously asked for help getting rid of his wife. According to his brother, in the months leading up to her death, Jacqueline had spoken to Keith about wanting a divorce. According to Vic, this was not the desired outcome for Keith. It seems he preferred instead to make a claim on her life insurance policy, on which he remained the beneficiary. Keith did exactly that. Only 2 days after her murder, he arrived at Jacqueline's work, requesting the paperwork to make the claim. Law enforcement, already deeply suspicious of his story, told the insurer to hold off on the payment. This left Jacqueline's 2 sons time to fight for her estate in probate court. It also meant that Keith was very short on cash. As he schemed a means of escape, he was forced to apply for a cash advance on his American Express. It was declined. The news that the panhandler murder had all been a hoax was not a surprise to everyone. In particular, Jacqueline's mother, who still lived in Rhode Island, told the shocked news media that she had always believed that Keith's story was nonsense.
I knew it was phony. I didn't believe her husband at all. I knew something else happened. Why would he stay in the area with her in the car after the man pulled the chain from her neck, as he claims? It was too phony.
The Trevane family reported that they were never close with Keith Smith. Because of this, it is unclear if they were aware of his criminal past. 20 years earlier, Keith had committed armed robbery 3 times at the same bank. In December 1999, Keith had lost his job with FedEx because of a loss of points on his driver's license. Worse still, according to the Baltimore Sun, he had just found out that he was HIV positive. Struggling to pay for household bills as a single father to his daughter and requiring medication, Keith had decided that the First Union Bank on York Road in Timonium was a prime target. Its proximity to Interstate 83 allowed for a quick getaway. So he walked into the bank wearing a ski mask and carrying a pellet gun. He jumped over the counter, emptied the drawers of cash, and exited from the back. This first robbery yielded a payout of about $15,000. 3 months later, he did it again. That time, he took home $16,000. It was 5 months later that he decided to put his plan into effect one more time. By that point, the police had a description of his vehicle. After it was spotted in East Baltimore, a police chase ensued, ending in a crash and the arrest of Keith Smith. He served 6 years of a 12-year sentence in its state prison. Keith told police that he had used the stolen funds to pay bills. When they searched his home, they located roughly $20,000, wrapped into bundles and hidden away in a black bag. Valeria Smith was charged as an accessory to the murder. It is unclear what case, if any, the prosecutors had developed to link her to the premeditated murder of her stepmother. It was clear that she assisted in covering up the murder after the fact. It was revealed that Valeria had been struggling. She was diagnosed as bipolar and spent some time institutionalized for treatment back in 2012. Since that time, she has also developed an addiction to heroin. It was believed that she was, in many ways, another victim of her father's, coerced into assisting him to cover up the murder. For this reason, Valeria was offered a plea deal.
A plea deal.
Helped her father. She's indicated in the plea agreement that, she helped her father dispose of the knife, helped her father dispose of, the other property, things of that nature. She's taken full responsibility for that. She's still extremely upset about the entire thing. And she, certainly apologizes to the rest of the family for her role in this.
But you can't tell us whether or not she's going to testify against her own father?
Valeria admitted guilt as an accessory after the fact, and she did agree to testify against her father. The trial took place in late 2021. Valeria told the jury that after celebrating her birthday, her father drove the family to Druid Hill Park with Jacqueline, whom she believed had dozed off in the front seat. There, her father stabbed her stepmother 5 times when she was believed to have been at least initially sleeping. He disposed of the knife in the woodland. Valeria was given 2 wallets belonging to Jacqueline, including the Michael Kors clutch. She testified that she was instructed by Keith to get rid of them. She left one at the bus stop at Caroline and Madison, where she watched as a group of youths wandered over and picked through it. The panhandler's story was given to her by Keith. The defense team grilled Valeria over the length of time it took her to come clean. They accused her of playing a more active role in the murder and lying on the stand to save herself. The 32-year-old recovering addict testified that she was forced by her father to lie but was telling the truth now because she did not want to go to prison for a murder that she did not commit.
And they were in love. They were soulmates. She was just an awesome woman. She was a powerful woman. Like, I looked up to her, you know, and
Keith Smith was convicted of first-degree murder in December 2021. He was sentenced to life in prison.
A selfish act where he not only manipulated the hearts and the minds of a country, but he manipulated the heart and the mind of his of his daughter, who was addicted to drugs. He was able to utilize this elaborate scheme and story to prey upon her and who she was and her character.
A month after her father was sentenced, Valeria was also sentenced. She was given 5 years for her role in covering up the murder. The verdict and sentencing came as a relief to Jacqueline's family. It was exactly the justice that they had sought.
I was laughing then, and I knew it was a circus. I knew it was all for optics. I knew it was a show, and I was just laughing. And I knew this day would come. I didn't know it would come this soon.